They had already placed the rope around her neck when the stranger rode into town. Dawn stretched thin ribbons of gold across the New Mexico sky, casting long shadows over the dusty square of Red Willow, a town where justice bent easily beneath the weight of a silver badge. The wooden gallows stood silent in the morning air, its weathered beams creaking softly in the wind, as if burdened by the memory of every verdict whispered beneath its frame. At its base stood Nayeli, an Apache woman with proud shoulders and steady eyes the color of storm-polished stone, her dark hair braided with quiet dignity. She neither pleaded nor protested. She simply watched the horizon, as though she knew something the others did not. Around her, townsfolk gathered in uneasy silence, their boots grinding against gravel, their murmurs drifting like dust through the brittle air. Some came out of fear, others out of curiosity, and a few out of shame they dared not name. The scent of leather, sun-baked wood, and distant sagebrush hung over the square, heavy as a secret no one wished to speak aloud. At the center of it all stood Sheriff Horace Whitcomb, his polished badge gleaming against his pressed coat, his expression carved from cold certainty. To the town, he was the law. To himself, he was something more. He read from a folded paper with a voice as dry as desert wind, accusing the woman before him of crimes she did not commit, his words echoing off the clapboard buildings like the tolling of a bell. Nayeli remained silent, her gaze unwavering, not defiant but unbroken, as though her dignity were a shield no accusation could pierce. A few yards away, a nervous deputy shifted his weight, the metal of his belt clinking softly, while a breeze stirred the hem of Nayeli's worn dress. The noose rested loosely against her collarbone, not as an instrument of violence, but as a symbol of judgment twisted by fear. In Red Willow, truth was often buried beneath suspicion, especially when it wore the face of someone born beyond the town's fragile borders. Just as Sheriff Whitcomb prepared to speak again, a distant sound carried across the plains, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats cutting through the silence. Heads turned. Conversations died. Even the wind seemed to pause. Out of the rising dust emerged a lone rider, his silhouette framed by the growing light of morning. He rode a chestnut horse streaked with miles of travel, his hat pulled low against the sun, his posture calm and unhurried. The stranger did not reach for his gun, nor did he slow his approach. He simply rode forward with the quiet certainty of a man who feared neither judgment nor consequence. When he drew within 20 feet of the gallows, he dismounted, boots meeting the earth with deliberate resolve. His name was Ethan Caldwell, though no one in Red Willow knew it yet. His coat bore the faded marks of long roads, and his gray eyes held the steady stillness of a man who had seen injustice before and refused to bow to it. For a brief moment, his gaze met Nayeli's, and something unspoken passed between them, not recognition, but understanding. Sheriff Whitcomb's jaw tightened. "This is official business," he said, his tone edged with warning. Ethan removed his gloves slowly, dust drifting from the worn leather as he looked from the sheriff to the silent crowd. "Then it ought to be honest business," he replied, his voice calm enough to hush the square. A murmur rippled through the onlookers, uncertain and fragile. The rising sun climbed higher, gilding the badge on the sheriff's chest and the rope above Nayeli's shoulders. Yet beneath that light, another truth began to surface, one carried not by authority, but by courage. In a town ruled by fear, one man had chosen to stand alone, and in that quiet act of defiance, the balance between cruelty and justice began, at last, to shift. The silence that followed settled over Red Willow like dust after a passing storm, thick and suffocating, as if the town itself held its breath beneath the growing light of morning. The sun climbed higher above the horizon, warming the wooden storefronts and casting a pale glow across the square, yet the air remained cold with uncertainty. Ethan Caldwell stood motionless beside his horse, his presence calm and unshaken, as though he had all the time in the world. Nayeli watched him with steady eyes, the rope still, resting lightly against her shoulders, her posture straight, her dignity untouched by fear. She did not know his name, nor he hers. Yet in that shared stillness there existed a silent understanding born of hardship and survival. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb's polished boots scraped against the hard-packed earth as he stepped forward, the sharp glint of his silver badge catching the sun. His expression tightened into a thin smile that did not reach his eyes. "You are interrupting lawful proceedings," he declared, his voice measured and smooth, designed to reassure the crowd more than to challenge the stranger. The townsfolk shifted uneasily, exchanging uncertain glances, their whispers drifting like dry leaves along the boardwalks. A shopkeeper leaned against a wooden post, a mother drew her child closer, and an elderly rancher removed his hat, his weathered face etched with doubt. Ethan removed his hat in return, a simple gesture of respect that carried the quiet authority of a man raised with principles stronger than fear. The brim brushed against his coat as he held it at his side, his gray eyes fixed on the sheriff. "Lawful," he repeated gently, as though weighing the word itself. "Then surely it can withstand a question." The deputy shifted beside the gallows, the faint jingle of his badge betraying his unease, while a breeze stirred the loose pages in Whitcomb's hand. Beyond the town, the vast New Mexico plains stretched for miles, a sea of amber grass and distant mesas, silent witnesses to truths often buried by men who mistook power for righteousness. Whitcomb's jaw tightened. "This woman stands accused of theft and murder," he said, his voice carrying across the square with deliberate authority. "Her guilt has been established." Nayeli's gaze remained steady, her dark eyes reflecting neither anger nor despair, but something deeper, an unyielding pride rooted in her heritage. Ethan turned toward her, studying her face not with suspicion but with quiet consideration, as if searching for a truth no document could provide. "By what evidence?" he asked, his tone calm, neither confrontational nor submissive. The question hung in the air, simple and impossible to ignore. A murmur rippled through the crowd, uncertain and fragile, as doubt began to creep into hearts long accustomed to obedience. Whitcomb folded the paper with deliberate care. "This town does not answer to drifters," he replied coolly. "You would do well to ride on." Ethan placed his hat back upon his head, his movements slow and deliberate. "I have ridden more than 200 miles across this territory," he said quietly, his voice steady as the sunrise. "I do not stop unless there is reason." He glanced once more at Nayeli, then back at the sheriff. "And today, there is reason." The wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush through the square, stirring the hem of Nayeli's dress and lifting a strand of her dark hair. Somewhere in the distance, a lone hawk cried, its call echoing across the open sky. Whitcomb's confidence faltered for the briefest moment, a flicker visible only to those who dared to look closely. The deputy shifted again, his eyes lowering to the ground, while the townspeople watched in silence, the fragile foundations of certainty beginning to crack beneath the weight of a single question. Ethan's voice softened, yet it carried farther than any shout. "Justice," he said, "does not fear the truth." In that moment, under the rising sun and the endless American sky, Red Willow felt the quiet turning of something long forgotten, as if the town itself sensed that the balance between cruelty and justice was beginning, at last, to change. The morning sun rose higher above Red Willow, casting a steady glow across the dusty square as the fragile silence deepened into something heavier, something waiting to be spoken. The breeze drifted gently between the weathered buildings, carrying the faint scent of sage and dry earth, stirring loose boards and forgotten memories alike. Nayeli stood with quiet composure, her hands bound, yet her spirit unshaken, her gaze fixed not on the rope near her shoulders, but on the endless horizon beyond the town. She had known hardship since childhood, had walked the sacred lands of her people beneath open skies where honor was measured not by power, but by truth. To her, dignity was not granted by law, it was carried in the heart. Ethan Caldwell studied her in silence, noting the calm in her dark eyes, the proud lift of her chin, and the absence of fear that no innocent soul could counterfeit. In that stillness, he found certainty stronger than any written testimony. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb watched them both, his expression tightening as the murmurs among the townsfolk grew louder, spreading like wind across dry grass. A rancher near the edge of the square cleared his throat uneasily, while a shopkeeper shifted behind her counter, her eyes darting between the gallows and the stranger who refused to step aside. Even the deputy standing beside the sheriff felt the weight of doubt pressing against his conscience, his fingers hovering uncertainly near his belt. Whitcomb's voice cut through the growing tension with practiced authority. "This town has laws," he said sharply, "and those laws will be upheld." His words echoed against the wooden storefronts, yet they lacked the confidence they once carried. Ethan remained composed, his posture steady beneath the broad American sky. "Laws are meant to protect the innocent," he replied calmly, his voice low yet clear enough for all to hear. "If they fail in that duty, they are no longer justice." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd, subtle yet undeniable, as doubt took root in hearts long accustomed to obedience. Nayeli's eyes shifted toward Ethan, studying him with quiet curiosity. She remembered the stories her grandmother had once told beside a desert fire, tales of rare souls who walked between worlds with honor in their hearts. Though she had never seen him before, she sensed in him the same unyielding truth. Whitcomb unfolded a document with deliberate care, holding it high as though the ink itself could silence uncertainty. "The evidence is clear," he declared. "She was found near the trading road on the night of the merchant's disappearance. Witnesses place her there." His gaze swept over the crowd, daring anyone to challenge him. Nayeli's voice, soft yet steady, broke the tension like a whisper carried on the wind. "I walked that road to trade woven blankets," she said, her English careful but fluent. Nothing more. The sincerity in her tone stirred the listeners, and for the first time, a flicker of shame crossed a few faces. Ethan turned toward her, his expression thoughtful. "Did you see anyone else on that road?" he asked gently. Nayeli nodded slowly. "A man on horseback," she answered. "He rode fast, as though the night itself pursued him. He wore a silver star that caught the moonlight." The words settled over the square like dust after thunder. The deputy's eyes widened, and a murmur rippled through the townspeople as they exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan's gaze shifted back to the sheriff, unwavering and calm. "A silver star," he repeated softly. Whitcomb's jaw tightened, but the rising sun revealed a faint sheen of sweat upon his brow. The wind stirred again, lifting grains of sand across the earth as if the land itself urged the truth forward. In the distance, the cry of a hawk echoed through the vast New Mexico sky, a solitary voice of witness. And in that quiet moment, beneath the watchful light of dawn, the foundation of false authority began to tremble as the truth prepared to step into the open. The murmur that followed her words lingered in the warm morning air, fragile yet undeniable, as if the truth itself had begun to breathe among the people of Red Willow. The sun climbed steadily above the distant mesas, casting a brighter light across the square and stripping shadows from the faces gathered there. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb remained motionless, though the confidence he once wore like polished armor had begun to dull beneath the weight of Nayeli's quiet testimony. His fingers tightened around the folded document in his hand, the paper rustling faintly in the stillness. Ethan Caldwell watched him without hostility, yet without yielding an inch, his gray eyes steady and clear. "A silver star," Ethan repeated softly, his voice carrying through the square like a slow and measured bell. "That is not an ornament easily forgotten." A restless stir passed through the crowd. The elderly rancher shifted his stance, leaning upon his cane as he studied the sheriff with growing unease. The shopkeeper lowered her gaze, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them. Together, even the deputy beside Whitcomb swallowed hard, his Adam's apple rising and falling as doubt tightened its grip upon his conscience. The wind whispered along the wooden boardwalk, rattling a loose sign above the general store, as if the town itself strained to hear what would come next. Whitcomb drew himself upright, forcing a thin smile upon his lips. "The word of an Apache woman does not outweigh the authority of the law," he declared, his voice firm but edged with impatience. His badge gleamed beneath the sun, a symbol meant to command obedience. Yet under its shine lingered a question no one dared voice aloud. Nayeli lifted her chin, her expression calm and resolute. "The truth does not belong to one people," she said quietly. "It belongs to the earth, and the earth remembers." Her words settled over the crowd like falling dust, simple yet impossible to dismiss. Ethan inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her courage. "Then let us ask the earth to speak," he replied. From within his coat, he withdrew a small leather pouch, worn by miles of travel and darkened by time. The movement drew every eye in the square. He untied the cord with deliberate care and revealed a silver pocket watch, its surface etched with delicate filigree that caught the light of the rising sun. A murmur rippled through the townspeople, their whispers growing louder as recognition flickered across familiar faces. "This was given to me 3 days ago," Ethan said evenly, holding the watch so all could see, "by a dying merchant who begged me to carry it to the nearest town and place it in honest hands." He feared the man who had taken his life would escape justice beneath the protection of a badge. The deputy's eyes widened, and he stepped back as though struck by an unseen force. Whitcomb's smile faltered, the color draining from his cheeks despite the warmth of the morning. "That is an absurd accusation," the sheriff snapped, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Ethan's gaze did not waver. "The merchant described the man who robbed him," he continued calmly. "He spoke of a polished silver star and a voice that promised silence in exchange for obedience. He said the law itself had turned against him." The wind stirred again, lifting dust across the square in slow spirals. The hawk's cry echoed faintly overhead, as if bearing witness to the unraveling truth. The townsfolk exchanged uncertain glances, their loyalty to the sheriff beginning to crumble beneath the weight of revelation. Nayeli watched in silence, her eyes reflecting both sorrow and understanding, as though she had long known that justice must sometimes travel a lonely road before reaching its destination. Whitcomb's hand trembled near his badge, and for the first time, his authority seemed smaller than the truth unfolding before him. Ethan lowered the watch gently, his voice quiet but unwavering. "Justice does not arrive with thunder," he said. "It arrives with truth." And beneath the vast American sky, in the golden light of morning, the balance of Red Willow began to shift, as the illusion of power gave way to the quiet, unyielding strength of honor. The silver pocket watch gleamed beneath the rising sun, its delicate engravings catching the light as though truth itself refused to remain hidden. A hush settled over Red Willow, deeper than before, pressing against the hearts of those gathered in the square. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath as the weight of Ethan Caldwell's revelation lingered in the air. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb stared at the watch, his composed expression cracking beneath the silent scrutiny of the crowd. The polished star upon his chest no longer shone with authority, but with accusation, reflecting the sunlight like a mirror that revealed more than it concealed. A bead of sweat traced slowly down his temple despite the cool morning breeze. "A trinket proves nothing," he said at last, though his voice had lost its commanding edge. The words drifted into the stillness, brittle and uncertain. Ethan remained calm, his posture unwavering. "It proves enough," he replied quietly. "The merchant entrusted it to me along with his final words. He believed Red Willow still possessed honor." The townsfolk shifted uneasily. An elderly rancher stepped forward, removing his hat as he studied the watch with narrowed eyes. "That belonged to Thomas Bellamy," he murmured, his voice rough with age. "He passed through here every spring. Honest man, never cheated a soul." A murmur rippled through the crowd, spreading from one whispered confirmation to the next. The shopkeeper nodded slowly, her hands clasped at her apron. "He sold me bolts of cloth just last month," she said. He spoke highly of this town. Doubt spread like dawn across the horizon, touching every face in the square. The deputy glanced at the sheriff, uncertainty shadowing his features. Nayeli watched in silence, her dark eyes reflecting both sorrow and quiet strength, as if she had seen such reckonings foretold in stories whispered beneath starlit skies. The rope rested forgotten upon her shoulders, no longer a symbol of judgment, but of a mistake waiting to be undone. Whitcomb straightened, forcing a brittle laugh that rang hollow against the wooden buildings. "Sentiment and speculation do not overturn the law," he declared. "This woman was found near the road, and that is evidence enough." His gaze swept across the crowd, seeking loyalty, yet finding only hesitation. Ethan stepped forward slowly, his boots stirring the dust. "Evidence is not built on fear," he said gently. "It is built on truth." He turned toward Nayeli. "Tell them what you carried that night." Nayeli inclined her head, her voice calm and clear. "Woven blankets and turquoise beads," she said. "They were meant for trade, not for harm. My people honor the road. We do not stain it." The sincerity in her words resonated through the square like a steady drumbeat. The shopkeeper's eyes softened, and the rancher nodded once more. "I have seen her work," he admitted. "It is known among the traders." The deputy's hand trembled slightly as he removed his hat, glancing uneasily between Ethan and the sheriff. The silver badge on Whitcomb's chest seemed heavier now, burdened by the gathering weight of truth. The cry of a distant hawk pierced the silence, echoing across the vast New Mexico sky as if bearing witness to the moment. Ethan held the pocket watch gently, closing its lid with a soft click that resonated through the square. The merchant's final request was simple, he said. He asked that his story be heard and that justice be served. Whitcomb's composure faltered, his authority shrinking beneath the steady gaze of those he once commanded without question. One by one, the townspeople lowered their eyes, not in submission, but in awakening. The illusion of certainty dissolved beneath the golden light of morning. Nayeli lifted her chin, her dignity unbroken, as the first true breath of justice stirred in Red Willow. And in that quiet turning of fate, beneath the boundless American sky, the town began to remember what honor truly meant. The golden light of morning spread gently across Red Willow, bathing the dusty square in warmth as the truth continued to settle like fine sand after a passing wind. No one spoke. The townspeople stood suspended between certainty and awakening, their faces illuminated by a sun that revealed more than shadows. Ethan Caldwell remained steady, the closed silver pocket watch resting in his palm, its quiet weight echoing the final words of a dying man. Nayeli stood beside the gallows with calm dignity, her chin lifted and her dark eyes unwavering, as though she drew strength from the vast land beyond the town's fragile borders. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb felt the shifting tide before anyone dared to name it. The murmurs had changed. They no longer trembled with fear, but stirred with doubt. He glanced toward the faces he once commanded so easily, and found hesitation where obedience had once stood. The rancher who had spoken earlier met his gaze without lowering his eyes. The shopkeeper folded her hands with quiet resolve. Even the deputy's posture faltered, uncertainty clouding his expression as the silver star upon Whitcomb's chest seemed to lose its shine beneath the relentless light of dawn. The sheriff cleared his throat, forcing authority into his voice. "This spectacle has gone on long enough," he said, though the sharpness of his tone could not conceal the strain beneath it. "The law does not bow to rumors or sentiment." Ethan's expression remained composed, his voice measured and calm. "No, Sheriff," he replied softly, "but it must answer to truth." A faint breeze stirred the dust. Along the square, carrying the scent of sagebrush from the distant plains. Somewhere overhead, a hawk traced a slow circle against the endless blue sky, a silent witness to the turning of fate. Ethan turned toward the deputy. "You serve this town," he said gently, "not the fear that binds it. Ask yourself what justice demands." The deputy hesitated, his hand hovering uncertainly near the badge pinned to his vest. He looked from the sheriff to Nayeli, then to the watch gleaming in Ethan's hand. The silence pressed upon him like the weight of a mountain. Finally, with trembling fingers, he stepped forward. "Sheriff," he said quietly, removing his hat, "the people deserve the truth." The words rippled through the crowd, fragile yet undeniable. Whitcomb's composure faltered as he realized the foundation beneath him was slipping away. His gaze hardened, but the confidence that once sustained him had begun to crumble. "You forget your place," he replied sharply, though the conviction in his voice wavered. The rancher took a step forward, followed by the shopkeeper and others who had once stood silent. Their presence formed a quiet line of conscience, not defiant, but resolute. "We remember it well," the old man said, his voice steady. "And it is not beneath false judgment." Nayeli watched them with solemn grace, her expression neither triumphant nor bitter, but serene, as though she had always believed that truth would find its way to the light. Ethan stepped closer to her, his movements calm and deliberate. "Untie her," he said gently, not as a command, but as a simple request shaped by honor. The deputy hesitated only a moment before nodding. With careful hands, he loosened the bindings at Nayeli's wrists, the coarse rope falling away like the last shadow of a passing storm. A quiet breath passed through the crowd, and the square seemed to exhale at last. Freed, Nayeli lowered her hands slowly, her dignity intact, her gaze lifted toward the sunlit horizon. Whitcomb's shoulders stiffened as the authority he once wielded slipped beyond his grasp, leaving him diminished beneath the vast American sky. The silver badge on his chest no longer symbolized power, but accountability. Ethan closed the pocket watch and slipped it gently into his coat. "Justice," he said softly, his voice carrying across the square, "is not the privilege of the powerful. It is the birthright of the innocent." The wind whispered through Red Willow, stirring dust and memory alike, as the people stood in humbled silence. In that moment, beneath the boundless sky of the American frontier, the town remembered what it meant to be honorable, and the quiet strength of truth restored what fear had nearly taken away. The rope lay coiled at Nieli's feet like a forgotten relic of fear, its purpose undone by the steady light of truth. The morning sun now stood higher above Red Willow, bathing the square in gold and revealing every weathered plank, every uncertain face, and every shifting shadow. A quiet reverence settled over the town, as though something sacred had passed among them and left its mark upon their hearts. Nieli flexed her freed wrists gently, the faint impressions of the bindings fading beneath the warmth of the day. She stood tall, her dignity untouched, her presence calm and resolute. To the people of her tribe, honor was not taken by accusation nor granted by authority. It was carried in silence, like the wind across the open plains. Ethan Caldwell stepped back, giving her space, his gray eyes reflecting neither pride nor triumph, only quiet certainty. He had not come to be praised. He had come because conscience had led him there, as it always did. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb remained motionless near the gallows, his polished boots planted firmly upon the dust as the murmurs of the crowd pressed in around him. The silver badge upon his chest gleamed less brightly now, its authority diminished by the awakening of those who had once followed him without question. He glanced from one face to another, searching for loyalty, yet finding only doubt and measured silence. The deputy stood a few paces away, his hat held respectfully at his side, his gaze lowered not in submission but in reflection. The rancher who had spoken earlier straightened his back, the lines of age on his face softened by a quiet sense of relief. The shopkeeper folded her hands and nodded faintly, as though a burden long carried had finally been set down. Whitcomb's voice broke the silence, though it lacked the command it once carried. "You have made your point," he said stiffly, his tone brittle as sun-baked earth. "But this town will not be governed by rumor." Ethan met his gaze without hostility. "Nor should it be governed by fear," he replied gently. The words drifted across the square with the quiet authority of truth. Whitcomb's jaw tightened, yet no one stepped forward to stand beside him. The absence spoke louder than any accusation. Above them, a hawk glided across the vast New Mexico sky, its shadow sweeping briefly over the wooden gallows before vanishing into the open light. Nieli turned toward Ethan, her expression serene. "You have given me more than freedom," she said softly. "You have given this town the chance to remember itself." Her voice carried the calm wisdom of ancient lands, and those who heard it felt its weight settle within their hearts. Ethan inclined his head with quiet respect. "Truth does not belong to me," he answered. "It belongs to those who choose to honor it." For a moment, they stood in silence, two souls from different worlds bound by a shared belief in justice. The wind stirred gently through the square, lifting dust in soft spirals and carrying with it the scent of sagebrush from the distant hills. The townspeople watched in thoughtful stillness, aware that they had witnessed something rare and enduring. Whitcomb's shoulders sagged imperceptibly as the certainty he once wielded slipped away. The gleam of his badge no longer commanded obedience, only accountability. He said nothing more, for there were no words left that could reclaim what had been lost. Ethan turned and retrieved the silver pocket watch from his coat, holding it briefly in his palm before closing his fingers around it. Its quiet weight reminded him that justice often arrived not with thunder, but with courage carried on the back of a solitary rider. He slipped it away and stepped toward his horse, the leather saddle warm beneath the sun. Nieli watched him in silence, her dark eyes reflecting gratitude deeper than words. The townspeople parted instinctively, clearing a path as he moved, their respect unspoken yet unmistakable. In the gentle stillness of the morning, Red Willow stood transformed, not by force, but by truth. And as the wind whispered across the open plains beneath the endless American sky, the town understood that honor, once awakened, could never again be silenced. The square of Red Willow remained wrapped in a profound stillness, as though the land itself had paused to acknowledge the fragile triumph of truth. The sun climbed higher into the wide New Mexico sky, its golden light spilling across the weathered buildings and illuminating every face with unflinching clarity. Dust drifted lazily along the boardwalks, stirred by a gentle breeze that carried the faint scent of sage and dry earth from the distant plains. Ethan Caldwell rested a steady hand upon the saddle of his chestnut horse, preparing to depart with the same quiet resolve with which he had arrived. He neither sought recognition nor lingered for gratitude. To him, justice was not an achievement but a duty, fulfilled and left behind like footprints fading into the desert wind. Nayeli watched him in silence, her dark eyes reflecting both strength and understanding. She stepped forward with measured grace, the morning light catching the turquoise bead at her neck, a symbol of her people and their enduring honor. The townsfolk parted instinctively to allow her passage, their expressions softened by humility and awakening. When she reached Ethan, she paused, her presence calm yet powerful. From the folds of her woven sash, she withdrew a small pendant carved from polished turquoise, bound in silver wire that glimmered beneath the sun. "Among my people," she said gently, her voice carrying like a whisper across the open plains, "this stone is given to those who walk with honor. It is not a payment, but a remembrance." Ethan regarded the offering with quiet respect. For a moment, he hesitated, as though weighing the meaning behind the gesture rather than its worth. Then he accepted it with a slight bow of his head. "I will carry it," he replied softly, "as a reminder that truth finds its way, even across the harshest land." Nayeli's expression softened into a faint, dignified smile, her gratitude spoken without further words. Behind them, the townspeople watched in reflective silence. The rancher removed his hat once more, pressing it against his chest, while the shopkeeper inclined her head in quiet acknowledgement. Even the deputy stood with renewed purpose, his posture straighter, his gaze clearer, as though he had rediscovered the meaning of the badge he wore. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb lingered at the edge of the square, his once commanding presence diminished beneath the relentless light of day. The silver star upon his chest no longer gleamed with authority, but with the dull reflection of accountability. He said nothing, for the silence of the town spoke louder than any defense he could offer. Above them, a hawk soared gracefully across the endless sky, its wings cutting through the morning air as it disappeared beyond the distant mesas. The wind stirred again, lifting grains of sand that shimmered briefly before settling upon the earth, as if sealing the moment into memory. Ethan secured the turquoise pendant within his coat, its cool weight resting near his heart. With a gentle motion, he mounted his horse, the leather saddle creaking softly beneath him. He tipped his hat to Nayeli, a gesture of respect that needed no explanation. She returned the nod with quiet dignity, her gaze following him as he turned toward the open road stretching beyond Red Willow. The townspeople stepped aside, forming a silent passage as he rode forward at an unhurried pace. Hoofbeats echoed softly against the hard-packed earth, fading into the vast expanse of the frontier. No cheers followed him, no applause broke the stillness. Only the whisper of the wind accompanied his departure, carrying with it the quiet knowledge that honor had prevailed. Nayeli stood beneath the boundless American sky, her silhouette framed by the rising sun, as the people of Red Willow watched in reverent silence. In that moment, they understood that justice did not arrive with noise or spectacle. It arrived with courage, guided by truth, and carried by those brave enough to stand alone. And as the morning light stretched across the endless plains, the town remembered that dignity, once defended, would endure long after the dust of fear had settled. The hoofbeats faded into the vastness beyond Red Willow, dissolving into the hush of the desert as Ethan Caldwell rode toward the horizon. The golden morning stretched endlessly across the New Mexico plains, the sunlight warming the earth and casting long, gentle shadows over the town he left behind. For a time, no one moved. The square remained wrapped in a quiet reverence, as if the wind itself lingered to remember what had just transpired. Nayeli stood beneath the open sky, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of dawn, her spirit unburdened yet deeply reflective. She watched the distant figure diminish along the winding trail, the turquoise bead at her neck catching the light like a fragment of the morning sky. Though Ethan did not look back, she knew he carried her people's gratitude with him, as surely as he carried the truth that had restored her honor. Around her, the townspeople began to stir, their movements cautious, as though afraid to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over Red Willow. The elderly rancher replaced his hat and exhaled slowly, his voice low with humility. "We were wrong," he admitted, the words heavy yet sincere. The shopkeeper nodded in agreement, her eyes softened by understanding. "Fear blinded us," she said quietly, "but truth has opened our eyes." One by one, others murmured their assent, their voices blending into a gentle chorus of awakening. The deputy stepped forward, his posture straighter than before, his expression no longer clouded by uncertainty. He removed the star from his vest and studied it in the sunlight, as though rediscovering its meaning. "This badge was meant to serve justice," he said, his voice steady, "not power." His gaze shifted toward Sheriff Horace Whitcomb, who stood at the edge of the square in silence. The former sheriff's shoulders were rigid, yet his authority had dissolved beneath the unyielding light of truth. The silver star upon his chest no longer commanded obedience, only reflection. No one spoke to him, and he offered no defense. The absence of words weighed heavier than any accusation. The wind stirred softly, lifting dust across the square and carrying the scent of sagebrush from the distant hills. Nayeli stepped forward, her presence serene, her voice calm and resolute. "Among my people," she said gently, "honor is not claimed by force, nor granted by fear. It is earned through truth." Her words resonated through the gathered crowd, settling deep within their hearts like seeds awaiting rain. The rancher inclined his head respectfully. "You have shown us more grace than we deserved," he replied. "Red Willow owes you a debt it can never repay." Nayeli's gaze softened, her expression neither proud nor bitter. "Let the debt be remembered through justice," she answered. "That is enough." The deputy nodded solemnly, removing the sheriff's badge with careful hands. There was no struggle, no spectacle, only a quiet acknowledgement of accountability. Whitcomb accepted the gesture in silence, his eyes lowered as the weight of consequence settled upon him. Above them, a lone hawk soared across the endless sky, its wings gliding effortlessly through the morning light. The townspeople watched in thoughtful stillness, aware that they had witnessed not merely the fall of authority, but the restoration of integrity. The gallows stood empty now, its shadow shrinking beneath the rising sun, no longer a symbol of injustice, but a reminder of a lesson learned. Nayeli turned toward the open plains, the wind brushing gently against her face as she prepared to return to her people. Before leaving, she cast one final glance toward the distant trail where Ethan had vanished into the horizon. A quiet smile touched her lips, filled with gratitude and respect. She knew their paths might never cross again, yet his courage would remain etched in memory like tracks pressed into desert sand. As she walked away from Red Willow, the townspeople stepped aside in reverence, their silence an unspoken vow to remember. The sun climbed higher, bathing the land in brilliance, and with it came a renewed sense of purpose. In that sacred stillness beneath the boundless American sky, Red Willow began anew, guided not by fear or prejudice, but by truth, dignity, and the quiet strength of justice. The sun climbed toward its zenith, pouring a steady brilliance over the vast New Mexico plains as Red Willow slowly returned to life. The morning air shimmered with warmth, and the town square, once gripped by fear, now carried the quiet dignity of a place that had rediscovered its conscience. Dust drifted gently along the wooden boardwalks, and the faint creak of swinging signs echoed through the stillness like a whispered promise of renewal. The gallows stood empty beneath the clear blue sky, its shadow shrinking with the passing hours, no longer a symbol of judgment, but a solemn reminder of the line between power and justice. Nayeli paused at the edge of town, her figure poised against the endless horizon. The wind lifted strands of her dark hair as she gazed across the sweeping desert, her heart steady and her spirit unbroken. She carried no resentment, only the quiet strength of one who had endured and been vindicated. In her hand rested a woven sash, its turquoise threads glinting softly in the sunlight, each strand a reflection of her heritage and the resilience of her people. Behind her, the townsfolk gathered with newfound humility. The elderly rancher stepped forward, removing his hat once more as he bowed his head. "May your journey be safe," he said respectfully. The shopkeeper nodded, her voice gentle and sincere. "You will always be welcome here." Their words carried no obligation, only the earnest desire to atone for past ignorance. Nayeli inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Honor your promises," she replied softly. "That will be welcome enough." Her calm voice settled over them like a blessing, simple yet profound. Near the courthouse steps, the deputy stood with renewed purpose, his badge polished but no longer worn as a symbol of authority alone. It now bore the weight of responsibility. He glanced toward the former sheriff, who lingered in silent reflection. Sheriff Horace Whitcomb no longer commanded the square with certainty. Instead, he stood apart, diminished by the truth that had unraveled his influence. The silver star that once shone proudly upon his chest now rested. In the deputy's hand, its meaning transformed. There was no spectacle, no condemnation, only the quiet understanding that justice had prevailed. A gentle breeze swept through Red Willow, carrying the scent of sagebrush and sun-baked earth. Overhead, a hawk traced wide circles across the open sky, its wings steady against the rising heat. The sound of a distant church bell rang softly, marking the hour and signaling a new beginning for the town. Nayeli took a final step forward, leaving behind the echoes of accusation and stepping into the freedom of the open plains. Her footprints pressed lightly into the dust, soon to be erased by the wind, yet her courage would remain etched in the memory of Red Willow. The townspeople watched in reverent silence as she disappeared into the shimmering horizon, her silhouette blending with the golden expanse of the desert. Far beyond the town, a lone rider moved steadily along a winding trail, the turquoise pendant resting close to his heart. Ethan Caldwell rode beneath the endless sky, guided by the same quiet resolve that had brought him to Red Willow. He did not seek recognition, nor did he dwell upon what had passed. For him, justice was not an act of glory but a duty carried onward, mile after mile, across the rugged American frontier. The rhythmic cadence of his horse's hooves echoed softly across the plains, fading into the vastness of the land. Back in Red Willow, the gallows cast its final shadow before noon, shrinking until it vanished beneath the brilliant sun. The town breathed anew, its people awakened to the enduring truth that dignity could not be silenced and justice could not be denied. And beneath the boundless expanse of the western sky, the wind carried a silent reminder across the desert that courage, once awakened, would ride forever beside the spirit of honor. The afternoon sun drifted westward across the vast New Mexico sky, casting a mellow amber glow over the plains as Red Willow settled into a quieter rhythm. The heat of the day softened into a gentle warmth, and the shadows of the wooden buildings stretched long across the dusty streets, whispering of time's slow passage. A sense of reflection lingered in the air, as though the town itself had begun to reckon with its past. The gallows remained standing in the silent square, no longer feared, but regarded with solemn humility. It was not torn down, for its presence served as a reminder that justice, once neglected, must never again be taken for granted. Inside the small courthouse, the newly appointed sheriff polished his badge with deliberate care, his movements steady and thoughtful. The silver star gleamed beneath the lantern light, not as a symbol of authority, but as a promise. He placed it upon his vest with quiet resolve, understanding that its true weight lay not in power, but in responsibility. Outside, the townspeople moved with renewed purpose. The shopkeeper swept the wooden porch before her store, pausing occasionally to gaze toward the open plains, her expression softened by contemplation. The elderly rancher leaned against the hitching post, his weathered hands folded over the brim of his hat as he watched the horizon with a thoughtful smile. The memory of the morning lingered like a sacred echo, shaping their actions with newfound humility. As the day waned, a rider approached from the southern trail, his silhouette framed by the shimmering light of dusk. The townsfolk paused in curiosity, their eyes narrowing against the golden haze. The rider slowed his horse near the town's edge and dismounted with respectful composure. He was an Apache messenger, clad in traditional attire, his posture dignified and serene. In his hands he carried a small bundle wrapped in finely woven cloth adorned with turquoise threads. The newly appointed sheriff stepped forward, removing his hat in greeting. "You are welcome in Red Willow," he said respectfully. The messenger inclined his head. "I come in peace," he replied gently. "I bring a message from Nayeli, daughter of the desert and guardian of honor." He extended the bundle with steady hands. The sheriff accepted it carefully and unwrapped the cloth, revealing a carved wooden medallion inlaid with turquoise and silver. Its surface bore intricate patterns that shimmered beneath the fading sunlight. Alongside it rested a folded parchment. The sheriff read the words aloud, his voice steady and reverent. "To the people of Red Willow, may this token remind you that justice is not bound by blood or tribe, but by truth. Let this town stand as a place where honor is protected and dignity is never denied." A quiet murmur of gratitude spread through the gathered crowd. The shopkeeper pressed her hand to her heart, while the rancher bowed his head with solemn respect. The messenger smiled faintly, his eyes reflecting the warm hues of the setting sun. "Nayeli sends her blessing," he added. "She walks in freedom, and her people remember your courage." The sheriff nodded. "Tell her Red Willow remembers as well," he said softly. As twilight settled across the land, the messenger mounted his horse and rode away toward the distant mesas, his figure gradually fading into the desert dusk. The townspeople remained in the square, gazing at the medallion now displayed above the courthouse door. Its turquoise surface caught the last rays of sunlight, glowing like a beacon of reconciliation. Far beyond the town, Ethan Caldwell rode along a winding trail beneath a sky painted with shades of gold and crimson. The turquoise pendant rested close to his heart, a silent testament to the bond forged between strangers through courage and truth. He did not look back, for he knew that justice had taken root in Red Willow. The steady rhythm of his horse's hooves echoed softly across the open plains, carried by the wind into the endless horizon. And as the first stars emerged above the quiet desert, the spirit of honor endured, whispering through the night that compassion, once awakened, would guide the frontier long after the dust of injustice had faded. The desert night unfolded like a velvet curtain over the New Mexico plains, its vast darkness illuminated by a tapestry of stars that shimmered with quiet eternity. A cool breeze drifted across the land, whispering through sagebrush and carrying the scent of distant mountains beneath the silver glow of the moon. Red Willow rested beneath that endless sky, its lanterns flickering softly along the wooden streets, casting warm halos of light against the quiet stillness. The events of the past day lingered in every heart, shaping thoughts and guiding hands with newfound humility. Above the courthouse door, the turquoise medallion sent by Nayeli caught the glow of lantern light, its intricate patterns reflecting hues of blue and silver like fragments of the night sky. It stood as a symbol of reconciliation, a silent promise that justice would never again be overshadowed by prejudice. Inside the courthouse, the newly appointed sheriff stood by the window, gazing out at the peaceful town. The silver badge on his vest felt heavier than ever, not with burden, but with purpose. He traced its edge thoughtfully, remembering the lessons etched into Red Willow's soul. Outside, the elderly rancher secured his horse at the hitching post, pausing to look up at the medallion with a gentle nod of respect. The shopkeeper extinguished the last lantern in her store, her expression softened by a quiet sense of renewal. In the stillness of the night, their actions spoke of change more profound than any decree. Far beyond the town's edge, beneath the same celestial canopy, Nayeli stood beside a low-burning campfire nestled among red sandstone ridges. The flames flickered gently, painting warm shadows across her serene face as she gazed toward the distant horizon. Around her, members of her tribe moved with quiet grace, their presence steady and dignified. The Apache messenger who had carried her words to Red Willow now returned, his voice calm as he shared news of the town's transformation. Nayeli listened in silence, her dark eyes reflecting both the firelight and the starlight above. She closed her eyes briefly, offering a silent prayer of gratitude to the spirits of her ancestors. "Honor has found its way," she murmured softly. "May it remain." The wind rustled gently through the canyon, carrying her words into the vast expanse of the desert night. Miles away, along a winding trail etched into the pale earth, Ethan Caldwell guided his horse beneath the moonlit sky. The steady rhythm of hooves echoed softly against the open plains, blending with the distant call of a night bird. He paused atop a low ridge, gazing back toward the faint glow of Red Willow's lanterns, flickering on the horizon. From within his coat, he withdrew the turquoise pendant Nayeli had given him. Its polished surface gleamed in the moonlight, cool against his palm. He held it for a moment, reflecting on the path that had led him there, and the lives forever changed by a single act of courage. With a quiet breath, he closed his fingers around the stone and slipped it back near his heart. Ethan tipped his hat toward the distant town, a gesture unseen yet sincere, before turning his horse once more toward the open frontier. The wind rose gently, stirring the grasses and carrying the whisper of hooves into the night. Back in Red Willow, the courthouse clock chimed softly, marking the passing hour as the town slept beneath the watchful gaze of the stars. The turquoise medallion shimmered faintly in the lantern light, its presence a beacon of unity between worlds once divided. And beneath the boundless sky of the American West, the quiet strength of truth endured, reminding all who listened that justice did not belong to one man, one tribe, or one town. It belonged to every soul brave enough to defend it. The first light of dawn returned to the New Mexico plains like a whispered promise, painting the horizon in shades of amber and rose as a new day unfolded beneath the boundless western sky. The desert stirred gently, its vast silence broken only by the soft rustle of sagebrush and the distant call of a waking hawk. In Red Willow, the town emerged from slumber with a quiet sense of renewal, as though the events of the past days had etched themselves into its very soul. Golden sunlight spilled across the weathered buildings, warming the wooden porches and illuminating the courthouse where the turquoise medallion shimmered in the early light. Its polished surface reflected the dawn like a fragment of the sky, a silent testament to justice reclaimed and dignity restored. The townspeople paused as they began their morning routines, their eyes drawn to the symbol that now watched over them. The shopkeeper opened her door with a gentle creak, offering a respectful nod toward the medallion. The elderly rancher removed his hat as he passed, his weathered face softened by reflection. Even the newly appointed sheriff stood still for a moment, his hand resting lightly upon the silver badge at his chest, reminded of the duty it represented. In that quiet ritual, Red Willow honored a truth it would never again forget. Beyond the town's edge, the open plains stretched toward infinity, their golden grasses rippling beneath the rising sun. Miles away, Ethan Caldwell rode along a narrow trail, his silhouette framed against the awakening horizon. The steady rhythm of his horse's hooves echoed softly across the land, carrying him toward destinations unknown. He paused atop a ridge overlooking the endless desert, the morning breeze tugging gently at the brim of his hat. From within his coat, he withdrew the turquoise pendant Nayeli had given him. The stone glowed softly in the dawn, cool against his palm, its presence a reminder that honor could bridge even the widest divides. Ethan studied it for a moment, his expression calm and thoughtful. Then, with quiet reverence, he closed his hand around the pendant and slipped it back near his heart. Without a word, he tipped his hat toward the distant horizon, a gesture of gratitude offered to the land, to the people he had aided, and to the unseen path that guided him forward. Far to the west, among red sandstone cliffs kissed by morning light, Nayeli stood upon a high overlook with her tribe. The rising sun painted the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson, and the wind carried the songs of her people across the vast expanse. She gazed toward the distant plains, her dark eyes serene, sensing the quiet bond forged between strangers by courage and truth. In her hand, she held a strand of turquoise beads, their gentle glow reflecting the promise of unity. "Honor walks with him," she said softly, her voice carried by the breeze. "And justice walks with us." Those who stood beside her inclined their heads in solemn agreement, their spirits lifted by the dawn of a new beginning. As the day grew brighter, life resumed across the frontier, guided by lessons learned beneath the weight of conscience. In Red Willow, children played in the sunlit streets, their laughter echoing where silence once reigned. Traders greeted travelers with open respect, and the courthouse doors stood as a beacon of fairness. The gallows, now untouched by shadow, remained as a silent reminder of a past transformed by truth. Above it all, the endless sky stretched wide and eternal, a witness to the enduring strength of compassion. And so the legend of a lone rider who chose justice over indifference drifted across the American West, carried by wind and memory alike. It was not written in law nor carved in stone, but etched into the hearts of those who believed that courage did not require recognition. Beneath the boundless heavens of the frontier, honor endured in quiet deeds. Dignity found refuge in truth, and justice rode onward with every soul brave enough to stand for what was right.